Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for this special presentation and partnership with the Riverside Art Museum. Today's program is a conversation between artists Richard Allen Mays III and Charles Bibbs with author and educator Romaine Washington. My name is Katie Porter, and I am Executive Director of Inlandia Institute, a literary and cultural arts nonprofit based in inland Southern California. Now, before we begin, Inlandia Institute respectfully acknowledges and recognizes our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseno, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, the Inlandia region is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, and we express our gratitude to them for allowing us the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. Now, a few housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded. It is in webinar format, so that means it is view-only mode. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A box. And the chat is enabled if you would like to send a comment. There is also live captioning available for this event through the CC button at the bottom of your screen. This event is part of the Blacklandia events series. And this was initiated last year in response to the May 25th, 2020 murder of George Floyd at the hands of the police. As an organization centered around the power of words, one that values speaking up and speaking out, Inlandia made a renewed and public commitment to providing a space for people in the Black community to come together. And from that arose a Black-led Black Voices Steering Committee and a new series of events, Blacklandia. And here to tell you more about tonight's event is Romaine Washington. Romaine is the author of two poetry collections, Purgatory Has an Address and Sirens in Her Belly. Washington has been a public school educator for over 20 years and has developed a social justice curriculum available for free on her website. Washington is the proud mother of two sons and a native Californian from San Bernardino who currently resides in the Inland Empire. And welcome, Romaine.
Thank you, Katie. It is so wonderful to be here with these two fabulous artists. We have artist and educator Richard Allen May III, who comes with a wealth of knowledge about the Afrocobra movement, having written and forward to Afrocobra, Experimental Art Toward a School of Thought, published by Duke University 2020. He is a staff writer at Artillery Magazine, and his work has been displayed in art galleries throughout the Inland Empire, as well as exhibits throughout the United States. May has taught courses in community colleges, universities, and prisons, and will discuss his artwork in the context of community. And it's wonderful to have this Renaissance artist, Richard Allen May. And then we also have the fabulous Charles Bibbs, who is a renowned artist and who has had his work exhibited throughout the United States. His art has been featured in galleries, magazines, TV shows, and movies, including The Black Madonna in The Secret Life of Bees. Innovative entrepreneur, he founded Art 2000, a nonprofit visual art association, and Images Magazine, the first national publication dedicated to ethnic art. As a jazz aficionado, he founded the nonprofit organization Inland Empire Music and Arts Foundation. He has garnered numerous awards and always with a heart for community, uplift, and enlightenment, bringing to life his firm belief that we are the keepers of our culture. Charles Bibbs has owned 8 art galleries and Studio B Art Publishing and Distribution, and is a longtime resident of the Inland Empire. I welcome both of you gentlemen. Thank you for your time and this opportunity. Let's start. We're going to find out a lot about both of you. You both have been in the community for a while, and some are very familiar with your work, and others are just getting an introduction. So I would like for them to get to know you both personally and as the artists that you are and known to be. So let's start with Richard. Let's hear a little bit about how you came to be an artist and knew that this was your passion.
Well, it started back when I was a second or third grader. You know, my stepdad, who I call my second father, he was an amazing artist. And I wanted to imitate how he would draw. And so basically, you know, I started out drawing racing cars and animals. And gradually, I began to become the artist of the class in my schools that I went to. My biological dad in Chicago, he was a diehard sports fan. So he knew that sports was not my forte. So he said, son, be the best artist you can be. So with 2 men, 2 fathers, I ran with that. And taking classes in college really affirmed that this is what I want to do. And gradually, I became to get involved in different arts organizations. Charles Bibbs Art 2000 was the first one that I got involved in, where I met other Black artists, which really was a haven. It was an affirmation that the things that I'm thinking about drawing and painting about were worthy to express. And that led to my first art show at Charles Bibbs Gallery. And I had a second major show as well. So he was my first main mentor in the arts. That led to me getting involved in Los Angeles, where I joined another arts collective called the LA Collective. And these artists had direct access to people who I just read about, like Samela Lewis, Cecil Ferguson, John Otterbridge. And so these elders in LA, I had access to, so they further affirmed my artistic calling to be a visual artist. Now, the writing happened because, well, my mom is a great writer.
Oh, let's stop there. Let's stop there because we're going to get the whole gambit.
Got it. Okay, no problem.
Let's hear a little bit about Charles Bibbs and your beginnings.
Well, I've been around a long time, and I thank God for every moment of every day, and every day is a challenge. Now, as far as my history, I started, you know, I wasn't that serious about being an artist because my dad told me the only artist he knew was a starving artist. So I wasn't about ready to get involved in that, not at all. But I was inspired by my father because as he's sitting at the dinner table and him and mom is pondering over how when is the next dollar going to come in to pay the bills and all those type of things. Yeah. He habitually doodled a lot. Oh. And I'm a little kid. I'm inspired by his ability to make these images, and there were of people. And I don't even think he understood what he was doing, but it inspired me. It lit a fire in me at the age of 3 and 4 years old, where the fact that I wanted to be able to do that. But like later on in life, you know, it just, you know, when I was asking Dad, I want to be an artist, he says, son, you think that. And he even sent me on a challenge and told me to go out and find a successful artist. And my dad was really, really pondering that word success. Yeah. Okay. So there's a big difference between a successful artist and a struggling artist. And I came back despondent because I couldn't find anybody. Mm-hmm. I started throwing off names like Charles White, Beard, and all these names. Yes. Okay. But my father says he asked me some questions that I couldn't ask. He says, son, was these guys, are they buying homes? Are they buying cars? Are they making investments? Okay, are they able to send their kids to college? I couldn't answer those questions. Okay, so at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to be an artist. But my enthusiasm and my ability, I always used to bring up my grade point average. I graduated number 5 in the class because of art from high school. So, but after that, I went into corporate America. But I never lost my sight on the fact that I wanted to be an artist. But I knew I had a lot to learn and to overcome that stigma that my father had. And that word is successful. Yes. Okay, yes. Now I can go on, but that'll take a lot of time. But right now, where my father left me was my eagerness to be an artist, but it had to be success, not struggle.
I like that. And it does segue into the next question that I have. And I didn't have anybody telling me, but that's not uncommon to have people say, you can't make it as a writer, as an actress, as whatever it is. So 25 years you worked before you did full-time art.
Yes.
So, and I know why now, because you shared that with us. Okay. How is it that those life experiences and those work experiences, how did that then impact you as an artist when after 25 years of dedicating your life, you decided, now I can be an artist? How did all of that knowledge impact you as an artist?
Well, those 25 years, right after high school and right after, 3 or 4 years of college, taught me the best thing in my life, and that is about life. I worked jobs where I always had ability as a leader. I always felt that I had that ability to lead people. Okay, so all my jobs were in a supervisory capacity. Okay, and I did everything. The greatest experience I had is when I was working at the fish cannery down in Terminal Island. Over 2,000 people, they're all dressed in white, and they got these sharp knives and they're cleaning fish, right? But I learned so much about the average work, what really work was, okay? And the culture of these people and how they stuck together, okay? Reminded me a lot about my family struggles, okay? And being in the United States is a blessing in some ways, but is also a battleground for teaching the most important things about life, okay, and how to handle stress in that life, okay, from one job to another. It was always supervising, but at the same time, I was learning the system that America has put up, the free enterprise system.
Yes.
And the only thing that I learned, I was seeking is, how can I plug in my art into the system? Because all these jobs that I was doing, Boeing aircraft, I worked for them. I worked for McDonnell Douglas. I worked for Pepsi Cola. So these are major companies making billions of dollars at what they do. And I learned the process of how they garnered inventory and how they advertise and all that stuff. And I worked in those departments. And at the same time, I was on the weekends, I would grab my son and my wife up, and we would go out and do art shows. And I'm learning how to adapt my art to those same principles of business. So that was so important about those 25 years.
So you continued to be the artist but it wasn't your forefront. It wasn't the main thing. And you were learning and melding the two together, the business and the art. You were learning how to do that.
There you go.
Beautiful, beautiful. And did you go to college? Did you get that back? Or was it just straight?
I went to college and did the things that were necessary to survive in corporate America. When I was in the food industry, I went to the University of Davis and got my food processing license. And that even added weight to me when I went to Pepsi Cola. And that was food processing. Then I went to aviation, and that's where I learned how to procurement, okay? You know, on-time inventory and all these factors that it takes to build an airplane and deliver that airplane on time, okay? Taught me so much, okay? Because people think, well, what does that have to do with art? See, that's the key. It had everything to do with art, because it's the same principle that this country has adopted that made it the leader of this world. And that's mass production. And make it available for the average person. And I learned a trick with Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford was the invention of mass production, okay? But he had an idea. He could have made a car for just the rich and the famous. But he said, I want to make a car that every individual in America can buy one. And that stuck to me, because that's how I wanted to do my art. I didn't want to just do art for the rich and famous. I wanted to do art for everyone, and so that they can grow and learn the value of ownership of art.
Beautiful. And thank you so much. What an inspiring story. And I'm thinking about my son as you're telling us about how you navigated the system and learned. So beautiful, beautiful. And Richard, you were in academia and you were in the community in Los Angeles, and you were about ready to take us on that journey. You want to tell us a little bit more about the communities that you navigated in Los Angeles?
Sure. Let me frame that story. You know, like Charles, being challenged to not be a starving artist, I had to also work as well, and go to school and live. And so I worked at Costco for 33 and a half years while I went to school and made my art. And I worked in the membership department. So that put me in direct contact with people, which complemented my desire to make art and teach and interact with people. And so the communication part was a direct link. And the writing happened. My mom, a great writer. I remember when I was in the 6th grade, and we had to write a poem about Dr. King. And you know how when kids, have their parents help them out. My mother wrote that poem. She wrote the whole poem. It was an acrostic poem, each letter. And I remember lined up at recess, and the person, said, okay, everybody line up. I want to read a poem written by a student for our Black History Project. His name is Richard May. And they read that poem at every single assembly. And I felt like, Mama wrote that poem. My mama wrote that poem, but I didn't want to say anything. So I just let her roll with it, you know? And so, my writing also was inspired by an instructor at Valley College, Diana Anderson. She groomed me and mentored me as a writer. And I had her for all the English classes and African-American literature. And taking the literature classes, learning about Black writers got me curious about Black artists, because at that time, there weren't very many definitive, comprehensive books on African-American art. It just wasn't, you know? I mean, and so I found myself going to the library and digging them up, and I would renew them over and over again.
Yes.
And so, so that taught me, you know what, who can write about this art? And so that led me to reading more about it, using my skills in speaking and writing to speak about it at conferences, because although I taught public speaking and went to school for communication, I would use all my classes to write about art, to speak about art at conferences.
You have a few master's degrees, don't you? A couple of them?
Well, I have a master's in education with a focus on teaching, and I'm doing a second master's right now in English with a focus on pedagogy. Okay. And my undergraduate degree is in communications. And you know, working and going to school, it was difficult to leave my job and go full time to a private art school. Yes. So I took several art classes over the years. And then when I honed my voice, there's something about being in a community of artists, of Black artists, and a collective of artists who affirm who you are and your culture, because that developed soul in my work. Soul. You know how James Brown says, I got soul, I'm super bad.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I would walk in my art classes with soul. I would turn the art assignments into about me and my culture.
And that is not in an HBCU, but that's in Cal State San Bernardino. It's in an environment where you might be the only person of color, but
that's
you
exactly
who you are, and it had to do with the collective that you were engaged with, the other artists that you were engaged with.
Yes.
Okay, yes. And talking about your art, oh my goodness. Afrofuturism, before we even had that word, while Octavia Butler was writing, and we had so many fabulous people engaged in that, you too were engaged in Afrofuturism because you loved superheroes.
Yes,
and
I did.
You imposed a political commentary to the superheroes. Would you like to talk a little bit about, I remember that as some of your earlier work. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, I had an uncle in Detroit. My favorite uncle, he was a comic book collector, and he got me into comic books. And so when I became an adult, I thought, you know what? I like Captain America. I like the artwork. I like drawing from comic books. But when did Captain America first begin? In the 1940s. And so I thought, how were Black people treated in 1940? You know? And why was this hero so popular? Well, they wrote that story in the 40s to have Captain America fighting Hitler, which was a deflection with propaganda from really looking at how Black people were treated in the United States. So focus on the other person and not deal with what's going on, you know, with legalized segregation. And so I thought, wow, you know, why don't I take an image of Captain America and superimpose that over a dilapidated house
Mhm.
with a Black family that is suffering,
Mhm.
with a neighborhood that is being gentrified. And so I did a piece called Captain American Gentrification, where I was driving in LA under the 10 freeway. I saw this old piece of wood. It was all dirty and messed up. And something told me to pull over, get that wood.
Yeah.
So I brought it home, dusted it off, and I got a light switch, and I broke the light switch in half, and I put it on top of the wood, and I collaged on the wood just images of poverty, and I painted on that top of that Captain America. Now that style was a direct link to the John Otterbridge, Noah Purifoy, David Hammond's, style of found objects. The assemblage art movement in Los Angeles when the Watts Revolt happened in 1965.
Yeah.
And these artists were getting the debris and making artwork from that. And so that's the influence, of really redefining, superimposing something over something else, and you give it a different spin, and you really expand how people see something.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. And talking about beginnings and the beginning of your art having voice and community, I want to now ask Charles, could you tell us a little bit about the seeds of, you were sharing how you were working and then you were going and selling your art. Could you share with us some of the inspirations maybe from the 70s, 80s TV shows that got you also thinking about art and how you were going to bring it to the community and how the community impacted your work?
Okay, well, during those years after corporate America, I continued to investigate, how to be successful.
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the things I paid close attention to was every chance I got, I was out there in the streets. I was the consummate street artist, as they called it. Okay. Anywhere somebody's saying that it's okay for you to hang up some art, I would pull my wife and my kids, and we're down there in the streets. I don't care where it is, and we're selling whatever we can. Okay. But at the same time, I was still going to other schools specifically to gain some artistic skills on how to do things. I went to Long Beach State and Cal State Dominguez, not for degrees, but just to get that information that I so desperately needed, because I was on a mission.
Yes.
I was on a mission to be successful. Yes. Then the Cosby Show came up. Okay. Now I'm sitting there watching the Cosby Show. We just spinned off from JJ in Good Times. Yeah. Okay, where he was a struggling artist. I didn't want no part of that. Okay, but when I saw the Huxtables, a middle class striving family with a house full of kids, and the thing about it, they had images on the wall that looked like me.
Yes.
Never seen that on TV before. I think Bill Cosby had an ideal. Okay, it was a subconscious ideal that worked. Okay, because the studio phones in those studios started ringing because Black people want to know where they can get that type of imagery. Okay. Yeah. I knew one of my best friends, Varnett Honeywood. I run up to her house because it was some of her images that were on the wall. Okay. So I walk into her house and there's stacks of prints, reproductions of her work. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I told her, and her sister was there, her brother was there, and she was just signing them. Okay. And I said, wow, what's going on? She says, It's the demand, Charles. It's a demand. And I know what demand is all about, okay?
Yeah.
If you can get the demand, then you got success.
Yes.
And that's what that was the profound lesson that I learned. But not only me was learning this lesson, thousands of other artists all over the United States, okay, was learning that lesson. The power of reproductions, okay?
Yeah.
The power of making art affordable. You know, up until then, Black people can go to museums and see art, knowing good and well they couldn't take it home.
Yes.
Okay. What we did is empower that whole reality in our own favor by mass producing our own works, looking at it financially and its capabilities, how we can make profits. Bottom line is all about profits, but at the same time, feed a hunger for Black people. They wanted some images in their homes that they can identify to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's what started it all for me. Okay. And not only me, okay, artists from all over the United States got together, okay, and say, we got something here. And as a result, over 3,000 art galleries, community art galleries and studios open up throughout the United States. And then what that created is publishers and distributors who were feeling the demand for those dealers. And then me as a producer,
yes.
not just an artist, a producer.
Yes.
Okay, a terminology that you find in when you just making widgets. Okay. So I became a producer feeding into this amazing system.
Yeah.
Okay, where we're creating heartfelt images that moves people. And I also learned the power, the subconscious power of these positive images in homes, especially when there are kids in the home. Okay,
yeah.
because
yeah.
they can make that subconscious connection. So if you drew a picture of Martin Luther King and it hung there for 5 years, one day that child's going to say, Dad, who is that? Then that father and those parents can get in a dialogue with that youth. See,
Yeah.
and this is the power. It was not all about just beautifying your home with images that look like you. It was a history lesson as well, because we were putting history lessons in art and selling it on the open market. Because we were selling history in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. So
absolutely.
that's what brought me to where I am today. Because from that point on, it was all about feeding the insatiable appetite of our people who hungered to be praised and say, I am somebody.
Yes.
Okay. And we joined that movement and made it what it is today, somewhere at about $5 billion industry.
Yes.
Okay.
And you talk about your work, Legacy of Hope, which is one of my favorite pieces when you talk about history.
Yeah.
Just fantastic. And you have a display, the county museum, where all history. So if you're new to Charles Bibbs' work, please, there's a link and we're going to share that link. Please go to the link and you will be able to have a gallery experience of African-American art and history and the merging of the two. And it's just a wonderful display. And I'm going to come back to that display in just a moment, because as we talk about history, Richard, you were talking about the found pieces and how you brought them together, which I'm going to go back a little bit to Afrocobra. When we're talking about history and making an impact, will you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the elders of Afrocobra and how they influenced you and what grew from that?
Sure. I recall going to a poetry reading at the World Stage in Leimert Park. Sonia Sanchez was the featured reader there. And there was an after party at this person's house in Culver City. Well, I didn't really know anybody, so I went anyway, so I could just, meet folks. And the person's house had a poster. It was called Black Prince. It was a rendition of Malcolm X done by founding Afro-Cobra member Wadsworth Jarrell. And I inquired about that poster, and really no one could really give me info about it. A couple months later, I'm in the library. I saw in American Vision's Afro-American Culture magazine, same image there. So I contacted the magazine, contacted the writer of the article, and they told me that the artist, Wadsworth Jarrell, lived in New York. This is like back in 1999, 2000. So I called him up. I dialed information, got his phone number, said, hey man, this is Richard May. I like your art. I want to write about it and talk about it. Could you call me back? And he called me back and left me a long message. And that was in 2001. And that led to me actually flying there 3 times, meeting him in Harlem, going to his studio. And that led to him introducing me to other Afro-Cobra members, which in the process, I ended up presenting papers on the Afro-Cobra art movement. It stands for the African Commune of Bad Relevant Artists. Okay.
Yes.
And basically these artists got together, and in 1968 and called themselves Cobra, the Coalition of Black Revolutionary Artists. And they wanted to make art that was relevant to the Black struggle, okay? Yeah. But in a different way, that would offer solutions to the problems facing Black folk, that would beautify and honor the culture with a certain type of imagery. Okay, that's my son right there, you know, in the background, yeah. And so what happened was that ended up developing into a school of thought. Now, why are they unique? Because other art movements like let's say pop art, Cubism, abstract expressionism, those were movements in the sense that they had a particular style.
Right.
And art critics named those movements.
Yes.
Afro-Cobra came together, trained at the preeminent institutions in this country, art schools. They came together and said, we're going to name ourselves. And we're going to make art that's relevant to the movement. We're going to evaluate how we were trained in these art schools, and we're going to come up with an African-inspired way to make art. Principles and philosophies of art making that would incorporate lettering in the artwork, that would use Kool-Aid colors. Now, what's that right there? Kool-Aid colors were these bright colors worn by Black folk, okay, that is a connection to Africa and how Africans dress, you know, bright colors, you know, vibrant.
Yeah.
And so that's important because I saw that even though I was part of a collective of artists in Los Angeles, there was a history of artists coming together and forming a collective. You know, before that, there was Spiral. You know, in New York, you had Where We At Black Women Artists in the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really important because we need a community.
Yes.
And so right now, I'm in the midst of trying to organize a writers collective.
Okay, we're going to come back to that in just a bit. And we're going to go now to Charles, talking about vibrant colors and talking about collectives and the galleries that you started. So let's talk a little bit about your artwork and your inspiration for those colors and images, a little bit more in detail. And then let's talk about how you mentored and how you started galleries and how you drew young artists together. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Well, you know, the dream that we all talk about, okay, and our struggles. You know, I had made a conscious effort that I wasn't going to dream about it anymore. I wanted to make things happen. I want to realize the dream.
Yeah.
So me and a few artists who understood the power that we had in our hands, we began to start thinking about collaborations in terms of how we can come together and spearhead a movement of taking our art and mass producing it for the masses of our people, where no longer can we read about artists only for reading's sake and never and think that no way I would ever be able to afford to buy a piece from these famous artists. We wanted to change that dynamic altogether.
Yeah.
So there was just a handful of artists at that time, okay, but we were mass producing our artists. Now, I mean our art. Now we created what we called open editions where you can have thousands of copies done.
Yeah.
Okay, and sign them. Okay, that created a boom. Okay, for people who had lesser ability to buy something more expensive. So we empowered, you know, the inner cities, and allowed them to participate in the arts. Then we created what we call limited editions. I mean, but in mass quantities. Okay, it wasn't too far off. I mean, for a project, we call a project one image, where you can make $250,000 strictly from your own people, okay, and empower all those dealers that were out there, okay? So this was a network. There was an active network. So what I decided later is that we got this active network of 3,000 dealers across the United States, all buying artwork of positive image from Black artists all over the United States, okay?
Yes.
We need something to bring us together. So I created Art 2000, a visual artists association that actually went out and inspired and taught artists how to come into this business. Okay. And then we did a magazine called Images Magazine. We had a network of dealers, but we had no communication between that network. Okay, so we created Images Magazine, which was a business magazine for art. Okay, we even hired writers to go out and interview people like Jacob Lawrence. In that magazine, 5 of the greatest artists that ever lived, we were the ones that last did the interviews before they passed on. Okay, now this kind of work here is not what you expect the average artist to be doing, but it was terribly and desperately necessary. Okay, so one thing led to another. We even did a traveling show. We took artists to the biggest art show in New York called the Art Expo. Okay, and we had a big pavilion there where we were servicing about 25 of our leading artists. The manager of that pavilion, that expo, his name is Mr. Smith, came to me and says, "Congratulations, Mr. Bibbs. 18% of the people that walks into that door were looking for Black art on tour." Okay, which was a amazing accomplishment because it showed great big distribution outlets like that trade show. That we were worth the input. We were worth the investment. Okay. From then on, we were some of the leaders because our people were responding to this dynamic movement of African American art, which now we call the golden age of African American art. Okay. So this thing goes on and on. I learned so much from corporate America. And I'm gonna give you one dynamic thing that fed into this. You remember the movie Rocky?
Yes.
Okay, I learned a important element of that movement, and it's called the process of diminishing appeal. Now that's a Hollywood jargon.
Yes.
Okay, when they started doing sequels, they
Mhm.
found out that you can only do 5 sequels before people got tired of it and
Ah,
stopped going to see it. So
okay.
I adapt that same process to reproducing my artwork.
Hmm.
When I did one successful image, I did a series out of it. Like this is a Lady in Red 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
So
Yes.
each project was a $250,000 project multiplied times 5. And then but it fed into what people do when they collect, the numbers game. Okay, if you got 1 of 5, what is the first thing you want to do to improve your collection?
Get
You
them.
get all 5.
Yes.
See,
Yeah.
it's things like that I learned in corporate America, and
Yeah.
I adapt that to art. And now sequels is a
The way.
common thing
Yeah.
among the strategy for doing reproductions of artwork.
Yes.
Okay.
And you have daddy to thank for that. Because if daddy said,
Yes.
yes, go be an artist, then you wouldn't
Yes.
have had all that knowledge.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. But there was a lot of other things that we learned, from corporate America that we adapted to art. And we got a lot of grief from doing it, a lot of criticisms. But when you look at the end results, and the economic empowerment of all that, what it presented for a section of our culture, which is the visual arts, became powerful, like music, okay, the music industry, because that fed right along with it, because I started doing CD covers for the music industry
Ah,
because that dynamic thing that we did with the sequels, using sequels.
to that.
Okay.
And then
But if you
that goes.
if you listen enough to me, the way I talk,
Yes.
I'm not your average artist. Okay. But I can tell you in no uncertain terms that nothing ever stays the same. You have to listen to the winds of change.
Yes.
And look at our society now, you know, things happen and you have to embrace change.
Yes.
You can't go against change.
And so when you
Okay.
talked about the golden time for art, you're talking about what time period, what dates?
Oh, that was from I would say 1995 all the way to 2005.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, it really came to abrupt when those planes hit those buildings in New York.
Then there
Okay,
was
and
the
that was a signs of there's going to be a change. But we survived that by
yeah.
coming up with different ways to adapt to the demand.
Yes.
Okay, and demand drives everything in this country, and
Mm.
art is no different. And see, for a long time it was taboo to put art in some kind of marketable category. Okay, but no, that's that's not going to work, not in America.
So we're going to come back to that because that's going to lead to where else we saw your art displayed as you talk about how you wove that together. And Richard, let's come back to your narrative because you talked about Afrocobra. We've talked about the influence of Afrofuturism, or rather how there was this alignment there.
Sure.
We have a couple of questions. And
Yeah.
the first question is, in what ways does your extensive writing complement your personal art making?
Well, let me just say that my extensive writing, it began in 2001 because I looked up this website of San Jose State had Art History Symposium and couldn't just apply to it. You had to be enrolled in a university and get a sponsor, a faculty sponsor. So being in the Black arts community in Los Angeles, I found out that one of the artists and educators there was Dr. Patricia Woodland. She taught at Cal State LA and retired, PhD in art education. So what did I do? I enrolled at Cal State LA, took her for independent study so I could get a sponsor to apply and present at San Jose State Artistry Symposium. So my writing complements my art in that what I'm doing is I'm making the art accessible to the viewer.
Yes.
I am taking it out of the academic speak, all those words that only people who are, taking art history classes understand.
Yes.
And I'm bringing it to a level where people can really understand it, a collector, a patron. And so my writing complements the art in that I'm taking the creative process of drawing and painting.
Yes.
That's interdisciplinary. And I'm writing in that way too. So when I write about art, what I'm doing is that I'm sampling, soul music, I'm sampling, Black history themes, movies, and I'm tying that to what this art means.
Yes.
So a most recent review that I wrote for Artillery is going to come out next month. It was a gallery called Band of Vices in Los Angeles. And the artist, her work was abstract. And when I walked in, I thought, wow, this work is amazing. So what did I do? I thought of The Matrix. And I thought, you know what? When I walked in that gallery, I was invited to take the blue pill or the red pill.
Nice.
So that's the opening,
Yes.
to pull the reader in, and I'll weave in some art terms, to describe the work, the formal elements, the color and the size. But I'm really like a DJ sampling from different disciplines.
Yes. That's one of the things I've enjoyed about your articles, is how accessible it is and how it gives me a better and a deeper understanding, because I can see where you're pulling in from contemporary, but also you teach me a little bit, like you said, you'll weave in some of that art history and the terminology. So I get to learn a little bit too while I'm reading those articles.
And what I do is, when you walk away from an art review that I've done, you will have a grounding in African-American art history.
Yeah.
Because I'm showing the shoulders these people are standing on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And talking about shoulders we're standing on, one of the things that I enjoyed, Charles, is hearing you talk about your art. There was one thing, I always looked at your art and I would see the lips and I would see the way that the head would be tilted. And I was like, I don't quite understand. And then when you said you created where you're looking up at the person, and I thought, oh my goodness, and how much I learned and grew from that. You want to talk a little bit more about some of the other angles and techniques that you use in your art? Because I see all kinds of styles in your art.
Yeah. Well, I think one word is movement. Yeah. And I try to capture the vitality of our culture in terms of, I being raised up in South Central Los Angeles. There's a tapestry of things that we do from the heart. I mean, the way we walk and the way we talk and the way we get into fads, fads. A good fad may last a year, then you're changing. And then if you walk around in an old fad, you get ostracized. Hey man, what's up? But we as a people have this you know, this thing that about us that is, it's hard to capture sometimes as an artist because you have to feel it. Okay. And that's what there's so much I want to put in the art. I be tearing up stuff and making different shapes, and everything's moving, is organic, you know, just like the way we walk with a certain rhythm in our walk. Okay. I mean, a certain rhythm in our talk and our language, and it's musical, you know, and it's part of our culture and who we are. And that's why we have so many, the greatest singers that ever lived, the greatest musicians that ever lived. I mean, you can't teach this. It's sometimes it's inbred. I always tell a story about how my son, my little baby brother learned to play a piano by ear. What is that? You know, is that part of the soul that's in us all? See, and that's what I try to capture in my artwork. But I learned a lot of traditional things too from other artists. The one name that strikes me, and I have to mention it every time I talk because she had such a profound effect on me, was Bev Doolittle. You don't know who she is, but a lot of people that collect her work know who she is.
Okay.
And she's a local artist right here in the IE. I don't know where she is now, but she did these beautiful pictures of horses and out of nature, but she had hidden images inside of those images.
Well, I'm going to look her up now.
Yeah, and listen to this. Now here, her art was compelling, but her way of doing business was amazing, and I learned so much. She had dealers, maybe about 2,000 dealers across the United States. And she'll send an image she just finished, okay? And she'll allow them to order as many as they want. And once she say you have a deadline of 2 months, she cuts it off. And that would be her limited edition number.
Beautiful. I like
that. That was so creative. It made an instant millionaire out of her. I don't know where she is. She's probably up in the mountains somewhere, not painting it right at all. I don't know.
Or painting and just collecting them for posterity.
But I've learned so much from other artists who have taken the art and applied it in a way where it was not for them. It was for the viewers. And she did everything humanly possible to get it into their hands. That was my motto. That was what I brought to the whole arena of African-American art, is that whole element of making art affordable, okay, for the masses, because what they create the future collectors.
Yes.
Okay. They create collectors of the future.
And I'm going to come back to another image that I would love for you to talk about in your art, but I'm going to swing back over to Richard now, because Richard, you were talking about writing. And here's the second question that's here is, do you ever incorporate any of your personal poetry, prose, or artistic writings into your collages and/or assemblages? And
yes, I'm doing a father and son series. You know, I have an amazing 10-year-old son who's going to be the next big movie director. You know, I paint and draw images that you hang on the wall. My son loves moving images on film. So the poetry that I've written is going to be incorporated in my father and son piece, because a lot of times you see from 1968 on down, you've seen like a lot of mother and child imagery, you know, even the, and so I want to change that like a little bit and really incorporate some father and son pieces. After 1968 in African-American art, you had this boom of just of the Black family, and of course in the late 80s through now, you have father and son pieces, but my work is going to be different in that I'm going to use poetry
Yes.
that I've written, and I'm also using images of vinyl 45 records.
Yes, and I've seen some of those. Beautiful, beautiful images.
So it's going to be multi-layered to
Yes.
really address, challenge, and encourage and affirm Black fatherhood. You know, I mean, the title of the on the flyer, it said statistical iconoclast. That's from a poem I wrote about me and my son. And that title implies, first of all, there is a myth in society pushed by the mass media that says that Black fathers are absent, deadbeat, and there are tons of Black fathers who are so involved in their sons' lives. And so that statistic is damaging. Now, iconoclast means a symbol destroyer. That's what it means. And so that series that I'm doing is from that title, which is from a poem that I wrote where I was a guest artist at my son's elementary school. I taught several third grade classes how to draw. And to walk in that class and hear my son say, "That's my dad. That's my dad." It was so amazing, you know, and to be on the yard, you know, during lunch and recess and have all the kids say, you know, they would refer to me as the artist, you know, as my son's dad, you know. It's a series of pieces. Now, what I'm also going to include is comic book imagery, because the Black superhero is amazing.
Yeah,
is amazing. And so I'm going to be redefining what a Black father is. You know, he's, you know, the end of my poem, I say, you know, that I'm my son's Superman, Batman, and Black Panther.
yeah,
you know?
yeah. So that's before we even had Black Panther out now. We've got it
That's
out.
right. That's right.
You were doing it. Talking about flying, one of the images, recurring images that you have in your art, Charles, is the birds. And I love, I think about actually the Legacy of Hope. I go back to that one, I believe it is, where there's the bird. And I thought about Emily Dickinson's poem, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. And you always have birds. And why the birds?
Because it symbolizes movement, perpetual movement, constant movement.
Okay.
And I was intrigued by that whole notion that I can take a feather and incorporate it in my art and help that image display that movement, because, you know, and it's become my business logo is the feather. Okay. And it has been, you know, technically and methodically, it has been a moving element in the future and how I drive my artwork. Okay, it has to have movement in it. It has to have a direction, and it has to have something positive that it's expressing, because the negative in art is just as positive, is just as forceful as a positive. Yeah. So I chose to use the positive because that's what we need in our culture and in our daily lives now. Okay, because I mean, just the reality of living is negative enough. So when I do, I'm not going to do anything that's going to imply struggle, evil. Okay, and I'm going to keep it on the up and the positive at every chance I get.
Okay. There's a couple of things we're going to go into, and I'm going to ask you about some future projects and some future, the visions that you have coming up. And that reminded me of one of the things we talked about yesterday for one of your projects. And so we're going to do that. And we have another question, or actually it's a comment. And I'm going to go to that in just a bit. We will have, well, I'm going to say it now and then we'll show it a little bit later on. We will have an ekphrastic writing for people to images, both from Richard Allen May and from Charles Bibb, and you will have the opportunity to write to their work, to their art. And so you will see one image, but he also has a website, and the link is in the chat, as well as Statistical Iconoclast, where you can go and click on that link, which is on his website. He has a lot of work displayed on his website. What it is, Richard, we're getting requests to see some of the work that we're talking about. I don't know if you have any right there, but you can absolutely go on his website and see some of the work. And his website, we just put the link in the chat again. So thank you so much for asking about that and wanting to see his work. So you will get to see one near the end when we show those two pieces of work, and then they will be posted in Submittable, and you'll have a chance to look at them when you decide to write to them, and say when you decide to write to them. And that will be all collected. So thank you for asking about that and wanting to see that, because yes, we have 3 pieces of Charles' work in the background, which is beautiful. So we get to see those images. So we want to see some of Richard's images. So we'll have one of Richard's images, and you can go to his website. Absolutely. Let's see here. Yes, and Charles Bibbs' website, where you can see a lot of his art, and he just talked about limited editions and second editions, and his website has that on there, has the different sites, the different levels that you can buy his work. And you know what, instead of me talking about it, Charles, why don't you talk about that?
Oh, it's everywhere. I mean, not only on my websites, but Facebook, all the social media. I mean, we have so much activity on these social media outlets. We have to hire people just to operate those things because of all the feedback and the questions and the back and forth conversation that's going on. It's amazing. And I just can't, sometimes I'm just overwhelmed and so full of joy and hope. You know,
yes.
when people have gained so much, the more people that gains from my artwork, the more I am impelled to do more.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's without that, I can do nothing. Without the constant feedback from my audience, which gives me direction, okay, and gives me that hope that I need to continue on. I mean, that is the most powerful thing that's affecting my work today.
Because it is a conversation. And
yes.
Speaking of conversations, I'm doing that segue thing again. We have Q&A. If you have any questions, please put them in the question box there, and we will be able to speak to them. As we've been doing, I think we've had about 4 or 5 questions. So this is a time where we're going to open things up for questions. And while we're doing that, though, as we're waiting for people to formulate questions, we're going to talk about future visions and projects, because I know both of you have some projects, being artists, having visions, that's part of who you are. And so, Richard, why don't you talk a little bit about some of your future projects that you have? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
My most recent project by Duke University Press really was a launching pad, which was writing the foreword to the book on Afrocobra.
Yes.
And writing that forward was an honor. It was. And so that led that actually built on my other writings I've done for Artillery Magazine. So my current project is to start a free writing class on how to write about Black art.
Yes.
And the email address is accessibleartwriting@gmail.com.
Okay.
accessibleartwriting@gmail.com. And what I'm doing is I want to show folks how to write about Black art, how to do it. Because the traditional route has always been, you get a PhD in art history, it's a very expensive path, and people don't at times have the time for that. So an intro course, that's project one. Project number two is to have on my website, that'll be ready in about 2 weeks, a document for purchase that will show people tips on how to collect Black art. Tips, I mean, because, and there's some very practical things that go into buying work that you love, it's going to hang on your wall, So, I mean, some advice. And my document is going to be different because it's going to incorporate some art history there. It's going to incorporate some different things that will make it stand out from what you would normally see.
Okay, so you are truly an educator in your art and in your writing, and
Yes.
we do have your website, and so you'll know, those that are listening, click on in a couple of weeks, or click on now and then come back in a couple of weeks. And your art is for sale, I believe, too, on your website.
It is, yeah, but if they want to find out more about purchase of it, they can email me at artcritic247@gmail.com.
Okay, Art Critic
247.
Yes, day and night, all the way around the
That's
clock.
right. That's right.
Artcritic247@gmail.com. And then you get more information on how to purchase work if you see something on the website.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the art writing class is accessibleartwriting@gmail.com to really get in the free class.
Yeah. And we have that email up there as well.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so you've got some great educational projects, and I can just see that I want to take the accessible art writing class, and we've already talked about that. And so now I want to swing back as we wait for some Q&A, because I know there's questions, burning questions there. I want to swing back to Charles, and you were talking about a couple of projects, and you think on a grand scale. You were talking about mass production, you were talking about accessibility for the masses. So there's two projects you were talking about, one art-wise that, oh, I can't wait to see that. I want to just talk about that. And then the other is in Riverside. And so why don't you talk a little bit about both of those?
Okay, well, I'll start off with Riverside.
Okay.
Something just profound just fell in my lap. I got a phone call. I forget who this person was, but I'm not going to mention any names. I do know who he is. But he says, we want to entertain a suggestion, okay? And that is, we want to develop a African-American cultural museum in Riverside.
Yeah.
And we want to use your namesake. We want to call it the Bibbs.
Yeah.
I think after that, there was a complete silence. I think the guy that announced that thought I had fainted. But that was something that out of nowhere, I didn't expect that. Okay. And I'm thinking that all those years that I was, pushing the success element and the money element and you know, how can young artists make a living, okay, and pushing that and trying to dispel that whole myth about starving artists that was that was brought to me from my father. And I says, you know, and then this pops up in my lap, and ever since then I've been, you know, just tireless, you know, working towards this. We're getting ready to do an event in my home city, Los Angeles. I live in Riverside, but I thought it was appropriate that I do a launching event, invite all my artist friends, and do it in Los Angeles, and tell them finally the IE is going to have a African American Culture Center.
Beautiful.
And I'm telling Riverside, you know, don't think of it as a Riverside Culture Center, because until there's other culture centers in Orange County or San Bernardino County, we're going to be the focus. So that's why even more important that we make this a success, because the only culture centers that exist now of significance is in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So I think it's, you know, the Cheeks is coming to town. That was an amazing endeavor. And I was just so excited about that. Okay. Now to be in the same vicinity, okay, now you have a cultural mega center.
Yes.
Okay, because Chicano art is huge.
Yes.
Okay, and now to have African American art alongside, that's even more impactful.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and I think you know, that's enough. That was enough just to change my whole way of thinking.
Yes.
About African American art and how we can make it and uplift it more and make it more beneficial to everyone, not just the rich and famous, but
Yeah.
for everyone to participate. And I think this is a step in the right direction.
Beautiful. We have a comment, it's not a question,
Mhm.
from Elliot Miller. And he says,
Mhm.
I'm very thankful
Yeah,
to
one of my mentees.
Yeah, I figured, yes, and that's beautiful. I love that, because we're talking about mentorship and we're talking
Yeah.
about the next generation. And here you have Elliot Miller, and he just says he wants to thank you for your encouragement of his art career and playing a part in national success in the art print market.
Yeah.
So he wants to thank you for your wisdom, which it comes from your dad.
Yeah.
We got to give.
Yeah, his story is a book in itself, a success story. Elliot Miller.
Parents got to give parents props. So
Yeah.
Elliot Miller says,
Mhm.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
And you talked about also, I don't know if it's okay to mention,
Mhm.
this series on homeless.
Oh yeah. I mean, me and my wife, I mean, one of the downfalls of driving around this town is seeing the plight of the homeless and see how it has gotten worse and worse. And see, when I had my gallery in downtown Los Angeles, I was right around the corner from Skid Row. And we developed a good sort of like working relationship with the population there. And I got to know the director, and he heard about this fictional image called the Bagman Storyteller, who basically, there's a quote in the Bible says, be careful how you entertain strangers,
Yes.
because they can be angels unaware, which
Yes.
tells me that the wings and everything
Yes.
is not a way to check on mankind.
Yeah, all right. All right.
So I created this fictional image called the Bagman Storyteller. You know, the bagman came from the bag lady thing. But I got 26 unique characters, and they all have special powers. And basically the whole concept of the bagman is to encourage not the homeless to do better, but people to do better in giving and trying to help the plight of the homeless, because that's going to be our job. You know, these people need help. okay? But you know, because I always hit myself sometimes, because when I didn't understand it, the first thing I would say when I saw that is get a job.
Yes.
You know, but see, it's not that easy. So here again, I'm using art to make a difference in people's lives,
Yes.
to tell a story, okay, a story that uplifts, a story that encourages, a story that tells about your past and how we're going to move things in the future. Those elements, you know, sell. Okay. And here I am talking, I'm talking like an entrepreneur again.
Yes,
okay?
you are.
And I can never, you know what? I think the motivation to be successful helps you tell the story. Okay. The motivation to be successful has everything to help you deliver that message a lot better. Okay.
A lot better. Yeah.
Yes. So it comes back to my father. He says, you ain't going to be able to be an artist if you're not successful.
All right. Okay.
And that's what he was telling me.
So we have people are excited about the Bibbs, all kinds of comments in the chat. They want to know where, they want to know when. And they're excited about the Bagman art pieces, and I am too. So I wanted to give you, do you have a where, when approximate for us yet?
Not at this point, but if anybody emails me, we'll put them on a master email list.
So
we will
go to
keep
your
everybody
website.
abreast. I've got over 1,000 Art 2000 members. They're getting information from me constantly. Okay. So just come on in and I'll just put you on the list. Just send me your emails. And then I'm looking for the day when we have that grand opening, know, when this thing is really happening. Now, I'm determined. Yeah, I'm determined, and it might be at a couple of years, and it might be sooner, but God has given me something to do, and I think see, you got to have a challenge in life. You got to have something that just burns you to the point where whatever you do, whatever your expertise is, it calls you to do things that you didn't think you can do.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's
just
advice.
Give a person a challenge. That's all you need is a challenge.
That's the advice for part of the advice, because we're going to get more into that. Advice for the next generation, and not just the next generation. I have to stop myself from saying just the younger people, because it's all generations, all ages, because we all need that inspiration and that voice to connect. So I say the next generation, but it's for all of us, and I'm getting inspiration from them. So here's our next for both artists. Are there any thoughts or considerations for the two highly creative artists with their respective talents working collectively towards a common worthwhile artistic goal? So
I'll let Richard answer that one.
Because there is something going on.
Okay, well, I'll go for that. Is a question referring to something that me and Charles are talking about doing together, or is it like a very general question?
It was a general question, but there is something cooking. So do you want to share what's cooking?
Okay, well, you want to share what's you want to talk about that, Charles, a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's it's me and Richard are venturing into a situation where we're going to do a book based on the golden age of African American art, starring yours truly, Charles Bibbs.
Yes,
and he's the writer.
Yes. So there's what's cooking, because they said, well, what's cooking? That's cooking is you wrote about the Afrocobra, you did the forward, you really got to know the artist intimately, and I can see their influence in your art. And so, and now here you are with one of your mentors, because as you said, he embraced you, got you in Art 2000. And so you're sitting with him and getting his narrative and your writing skills. You are using those to make sure that that story is told while the artist is here. And we can all glean and learn from that with your writing skills. So we got a wonderful on that response on what's cooking. And so we have about 5 minutes left. Time just went by. We got your vision. I thought about, here's 2 brief questions, and then we're going to show the images. I think Janine has those images. We have all kinds of art. We've got Instagram art. We've got art on Vans, tennis shoes. There's always these art contests on sneakers. What do you think about? I kind of already know, but I want to just get a little bit. What do you think about that? Because that might encourage or steer a young person in a different direction. What do you think about some of this Instagram and shoe art?
It's the wave of the future. I mean, for artists in their expression. I mean, if it wasn't for the ideal that I can mass produce and manipulate my art, I don't think I can ever get the namesake that I've had today. And also be able to, art on objects, inanimate objects, sells, and, that's the golden word right now, sales, and I'm not talking like an artist, right?
So I'm going to swing over to Richard real quick because we're almost out of time. Richard, what is, as somebody who writes about art from a variety of perspectives, what do you think about shoe art and Instagram art? And what advice would you have for a young person in regards to that?
I would say one is to find someone who's doing what you're doing and let them mentor you. 2 is to nurture your voice, nurture the soul that's going to come out in your work, because you have a unique voice, and 3, a comedian once said, perseverance will get you there. Talent will keep you there. So just don't give up. Don't give up.
There you go. Thank you. And we're going to look now at the 2 pieces for the ekphrastic writing. And ekphrastic just means you're looking at art. The artists are not going to give you the background to the work, because what you're going to do is look at it and let it speak to you. Here are our 2 pieces. Richard, do you want to give the title of your piece?
Yes, my piece is called Conversations with My Father.
Yeah.
It's
It's
an
on the
abstract piece, on the left. And
then,
that's it.
And
Oh,
Charles,
okay.
Okay. Charles, do you want to?
Okay. This is the Music Angel. Okay. And here I am using my creativity, imagination.
Okay, we're not going to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, because we're going to let them write, and then you will get a chance to read what is in Submittable, what people write about this. And there's the link for Submittable that's in the chat. And so we so look forward to reading what you write on those 2 beautiful works of art. Thank you all so very much. This has been insightful, informational, and inspirational, and basically awesome. That was one of the attendees. And I am going to second that and thank you. This is our time, an hour and a half. It flew by.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. We've all done that. I have learned so much from you guys. You can't see all the tabs I now have open because every time you mention somebody, I went and looked them up. And this is really wonderful. And thank you all. And thank you, Romaine, thank you to Richard, and thank you, Charles. And, we hope that everybody really enjoyed this tonight. And we're also going to drop a link to the chat. Speaking of free workshops, I know Richard is going to have a workshop on writing about art. We are also offering another free writing workshop with Dr. Natalie Graham as part of the Blacklandia series in July, a virtual workshop, and it is on poetry and photography, and may involve some ekphrasis as well. So hopefully you've all learned a new word too. Ekphrasis is writing about art. So
thank you so much, Katie and Inlandia, for making this possible.
We're just
Thank you
thrilled to
so
be able
much.
to do this. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
wonderful.
Right. Okay.
See you all again sometime soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye. Good night.